Early in the morning, Betty was awoken by the sound of the doorbell. She opened her eyes and looked around. Maya was not in her bed. She is probably with Vera. Betty thought, and as confirmation of her thoughts, she heard as Maya opened the front door and asked, "Who are you?" "I'm looking for my wife," a man answered. During the Leningrad blockade, Lev drove a truck through Ladoga Lake, transporting people from Leningrad, and food to Leningrad. Then, he went all the way to Berlin with his battalion, as a truck driver, carrying the battalion cannon and soldiers in his truck. The war changed people, making friends like brothers, but also hardening their souls. Soldiers were different ages, nationalities, and backgrounds, but they all had a lot in common. They fought together, were ready to give their life for their soldier brothers, and almost all of them had losses in their families due to starvation, disease, or German occupation. Soldiers were there for each other, sharing their grief. They were so humane to each other that Lev was shocked to watch his soldier brothers when the battalion entered Berlin. Revenge drove a wave of mass murders, insults, and robberies. Lev watched his brother soldiers commit atrocious crimes, such as the torture of 2 old German women. They first stripped and raped them, and then cut their skin in a star shape on their backs. Then, they tied them together scornfully in a pose as if they had made love to each other, leaving them to die. They raped a young German woman in the most disgusting and brutal way, then raped her little baby girl, and let the baby bleed to death in front of her mother's eyes. Afterward, they enjoyed watching the young woman's slow and painful, agonizing death. They would use German women and children as targets in shooting competitions and would then force the survivors to fight to the death. The children were killed first and then the women. The victims cried something in German, making the brother soldiers angrier and thirstier for more German blood. It was hard to see his soldier brothers wounded, dismembered, or dead on battlefields, but it was harder to see them turning into ugly spectators who used women and children as gladiators. They were impossible to reason with. Not only did they kill without fear of punishment, but they also killed without fear of guilt. The war had turned them into serial killers and robbers in law. The battalion was dismissed from the army in only 2 long years after the end of the war. Soldiers started to fill Lev's truck with the trophies that they had taken from Germans' homes. Lev had no trophies and felt like an outsider. His brother soldiers made fun of him for coming home empty-handed, but he felt dirty doing what they did. Lev couldn't refuse to have their trophies in his truck, and drove them all the way to Leningrad. In the city, the soldiers unloaded the truck and left quickly, rushing home. However, there was one big bag left. Lev jumped into the truck to check it. The bag moved. Lev pulled his gun and waited alertly. The face of a boy appeared at the bag opening. "Who are you?" Lev asked loudly, pointing his gun at the boy. "Please. Don't shoot," the boy cried. "What are you doing here?" "I didn't want to stay in Germany. I wanted to go back home," the boy whimpered. "I hid here because nobody wanted to take me home." "Hm. All right then. Good thing I didn't shoot you." Lev put his gun away and helped the boy off the truck. "So, where do you go now?" "I don't know. I have nobody anymore. Maybe to Minsk, I lived there before the war." "Are you hungry?" "Yes." Lev pulled some bread from his bag and handed it to the boy. "Here." A soldier stood at the doorstep of Vera's apartment, holding a small suitcase in his left hand and a 14-year-old boy with his right hand. His shirt was covered with medals, and the heart under his shirt was filled with love and hope for a better future. Vera opened the door of her bedroom, slowly walked out, and stared at a beautiful military young man at the front door. A teardrop went down her cheek, he had such a resemblance to her boys. "I'm looking for my wife," he said. Betty ran to the front door. She stretched her hands, moving forward to hug him, when she saw the boy. "Sam." "Betty," and all 3 of them embraced each other and stood there for an eternity, sharing a long hug. Betty's eyes were watery. Sam was shining with happiness. Lev was searching for the right words to say. I didn't want to fail to give you a son. He finally uttered, controlling his emotions, and looking into his talisman's eyes. So, I brought him with me. I knew you wouldn't mind. Oh. Dear. I don't. My name is Lev, he said, giving Vera his hand. Vera, she answered, slowly taking a couple of steps forward and uncertainly stretching out her hand. It's very nice to meet you, Vera. Lev smiled widely. Talisman wrote me about you. Who is Talisman? Vera was surprised. Talisman is my wife, Betty. He hugged his wife. She told me that you don't have a family. So, I thought that we would need a grandma because we are going to have a lot of babies. Aren't we? He lifted his wife in his hands as she was shining with happiness. Vera smiled. That would be a perfect idea.